This is Gerardo Del Real with the Outsider Club. Joining me today is President and CEO of Hannan Metals, Mr. Michael Hudson. Mike, thank you for having us.
Gerardo, welcome to Ireland.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. We've talked in the past about your district scale high-grade zinc package and how it's literally the right project at the right time in the right place. And I want to talk about why that is. But first off, I'd love for you to introduce Hannan Metals. Why the name Hannan Metals?
Well, there's no better place to describe it than where we are. We've got the amazing Franciscan Queen Abbey behind us, 14th century construction there, built on an old Norman castle. This is where a lot of the English history is developed. Henry VIII's been here, Thomas Cromwell, and amongst all that, something else very famous happened here in the mining space. A young man was born in 1840, Patrick Hannan, in this town, just very close to us, just right here. And at that time in Ireland, there was the ending of the mine. So what we were going to talk about soon is our project, but that was an old mine and one of the largest mines in the 1830s and 1840s in Ireland. And then came the potato famine that many of your listeners will know about. It was a very hard time here in Ireland, and there was more people in Ireland at the time back in the 1840s than there is today. So the population has never recovered from that whole time. And so it must have been a very hard time. Mining had finished, very hard to feed the population, and by the time he was 20, Patrick Hannan, who was born here in Quinn, emigrated to Australia. And he went on to find Australia's largest gold mine, the Kalgoorlie goldfield, that's still in production today.
It's incredible.
He found that in 1893, so, and there's some fantastic stories there. So obviously the accent, I'm an Australian, I couldn't help but with the association of Quinn, and literally not too far below us here is our project, and this area forms part of our exploration project. So with Patrick being born here, with him finding Australia's largest goldfield, what a wonderful explorer to name our company after, I should say.
Absolutely. Now, we talked about Ireland being the right place. Many people aren't aware that Ireland is one of the top zinc producing countries in the world. Can we talk a bit about that?
Yeah, well, it's the places like behind us that people generally associate with Ireland, not zinc mining, but there's been some significant mines here since that early phase I talked about, the 1840s, 1830s, and then Ireland was thought to have nothing left until another Pat Hughes in the 1950s went across, made his money prospecting in Canada after going there initially to bricklay, came back here to Ireland and came back with the premise that there was more to find. He was very successful. In a few years he found the Tina deposit and then eventually went on to found Navan, which is still in production today and is Europe's largest base metal mine. So there's been a very rich history. In fact, that idea of Patrick Hughes from the 1950s, that there was more to find, was very right, because there's been no more zinc found in the world since those days on a per square kilometre basis than here in Ireland.
It's impressive.
So Europe's largest gold mine, zinc mine, is still in production, and there's been many more mines opened and shut, and it's where zinc is formed and is predictable to find, and the Irish have been very good at finding a lot of zinc.
Now, you mentioned that it's predictable to find, and that's important, and we'll talk about why that's important to this project. Before we get to that aspect of it, can we talk a bit about your background? Because you cut your teeth with zinc projects.
I did. I know zinc. I spent the first 12 years of my career starting in Australia, 3 years underground, 1.5 kilometres underground daily, working in a zinc mine. And then I went and started exploring for zinc around the world. It took me to some fantastic places, to Pakistan, to Peru. I even came here to Ireland during the 1990s, and Pasminco was the largest integrated zinc company of the day. So we spent a lot of time looking for zinc. I knew a lot about Ireland, of course, and that's what led me back here.
Perfect. Now, we've talked about it being the right time. I believe we're clearly in a base metals bull market, and what an opportune time to have a high-grade district-scale land package in Ireland, right? Tell us about the project, Mike.
Absolutely. It is a fantastic time. It is a zinc bull market. I mean, only a week or two ago we were at 12-year highs with the zinc price, and zinc is one of those, like many metals, but it has a much more volatile history. There's been a huge underdevelopment over the long term in zinc. So this is not just a normal 10-year cycle where we see undersupply come in and more mines will come on, and we're not seeing that now. The zinc remains in deficit, the supply remains in deficit. There's been a lack of zinc exploration worldwide for the last 40 years, essentially. We're now putting into play, or mines are coming on that have been sitting around for literally 80 years. They've been compromised because of metallurgical issues or difficulty in terms of location. So those new discoveries just have not been made in the zinc space, and that will lead to, I think, my prediction is that this deficit will continue for a lot longer. It is controlled by a few players. The Chinese traditionally have controlled the excess supply coming to the market. Their environmental cleanup seems to have limited their ability to produce into this deficit, and of course Glencore took 500,000 tonnes off the market and have shown great restraint in bringing that on very slowly. So they also control the market greatly. But there is that fundamental reason there's been a lack of zinc exploration worldwide for a long time now.
Now we know in the zinc space, with the zinc market, it's controlled by the major players. You alluded to that. And anytime that you're exploring a district scale land package, you need to check a few boxes. Location and infrastructure obviously is one. Metallurgy obviously is a second box that you definitely want to check. And the third is that scale, the potential for scale, because any mid-tier or major that wants to come in and take over a project isn't looking for a small project. So I'd love for you to talk about the project a bit and talk about the infrastructure and the early metallurgical results that you've had some success with.
Okay, so a very broad question. We can, I suppose, start with the history of this project. So Patrick Hannan, we can go back to the history, was born here in 1840s, but and the mine shut around that time, those Victorian age mines, but it was only 10 years ago that this discovery here was made, Kilbrickan. So it's one of Ireland's most recent discoveries. It was explored intensively with $25 million of cash spent in the ground, drilling out what is Ireland's 10th largest resource today. So it's had a lot of cash put into it by mainly Lundin Mining, who owned the project, and we bought it from in 2015. So a very good start with a very good resource base. There's approximately just over 4 million tonnes that have been defined at high grades. You know, and when I talk about high grades, I mean 10%. Combined lead zinc is what you really want to put a figure on as a high grade deposit. And we figure that we need to find, our modest first pass aim is 10 million tonnes at 10% to put us into an economic category, and that's our aim on this project. So you can see we're 30 to 40% of the way there already. But this project is so much more, as you've mentioned. So we have a good start over 1.5 kilometres where $25 million was spent. But if that's all we had in that area, there'd be very little opportunity to get bigger than our modest aim to put 10 million tonnes and put some economics around that. What the majors look for are systems that will produce mines that can produce through multiple cycles. And that means that they need to have lots of tonnes associated with them, and we're talking 10 million tonnes could produce, and there was a mine here that shut down a few years ago, Galmoy. That was a 8 million tonne system, and that was a 12-year mine life. But we'd like to find mines that last longer and can produce a larger amount, because that's really only how mining works. That you must have the scale to produce over the long term and ride these cycles. So a land package that has a large scale. We've got a very large chunk of southwestern Ireland here that we're exploring. The scale is something like 20 kilometres of strike length that we've got beyond Kilbricken, but and it's much more than that too, because we've got to start thinking 3 dimensions. So certainly there's this project, even if something can be found economic in the short term, will be explored for decades to come. There's huge opportunity here, and it's one of the last frontiers of Ireland that since the 1950s, I should say, exploration has just moved down here, and there's been some big discoveries made around us. There's 100 million tonnes in historic resources and new discoveries that have been made within 40 kilometres of where we stand today.
Sure. Now you mentioned that resource at Kilbricken, and it's a great start, but I want to talk a little bit about some of the details, the initial recovery, some of the testing that you've done on the metallurgical side. It's important because it's clean. Can we talk a bit about that?
Yes, you had to ask that question twice to get it out of me.
Absolutely.
My apologies. I got talking about the large scale, but even though we're talking about large scales, the details are always important, and they're the things that throw up the red flags for projects. But Irish deposits in general produce beautiful concentrates. They're in demand. Smelters like having them. They're very low iron, low in impurities, and recoveries are good, and the grade is good. So that's what we have here in Ireland also. The initial work that was conducted by previous workers showed basically no red flags here, all good. But what we're doing now is doing a lot more work. So right at this moment, literally, we've got samples in the UK going lock cycle test work that will demonstrate that in real world scenarios, those results. So basically we're there to validate the earlier work and advance the understanding. So no red flags so far.
Excellent. Now you touched on something that I want to talk about, Irish style deposits. They tend to be predictable, and they tend to happen not in isolation. You tend to have clusters of deposits. Once you find an ore body, it tends to become a bit easier to explore for other ore bodies. Can we talk about that a bit?
Yeah, so as geologists, we like to put things in boxes, and Irish style deposits are a specific type of zinc deposit that form in carbonate rocks. They have very strong structural controls, so if we can define and understand the structures, we're a long way to understanding the controls on mineralisation and being predictable about where they can form. And typically, pretty much is always the case, we find pods. So we don't find one massive body in these Irish systems. They form in clusters of maybe 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 bodies, and on our website we show some good examples in our presentations there about some of the other examples here in Ireland. Now we've got 2 mineralised bodies that we found. We call one the chimney and one the fort, and then we've got multiple targets defined by structure and geochemistry that show that this system has the potential to become much larger immediately around those pods. And based on what we know of the other systems, there's very good science to believe that this will form multiple pods also, this system. We've already got 2, we know, but we think there's more.
Excellent. Now you have a rig turning now?
We certainly do. We've had a rig turning, 1, if not more rigs turning for the last year.
Now you also just recently completed a 41 kilometer seismic survey. Can you talk a bit about that approach?
As we've talked about, the line went through this lovely village of Quinn. We ran 40 kilometres of 2D seismic, and seismic in the oil business has been around for 100 years. It's a technique that's well understood, and I think most people would associate seismics with oil exploration. Now in mineral exploration we work at different scales where the oil explorers are looking for kilometres and kilometres of aquifers and traps that can contain that oil or gas. We look at tens of metres. Our mineralised body is 1 kilometre long by 200 metres wide by 10 metres thick. So it's a very different scale of target that we look for in our business. So that's one challenge. And then the rocks that we're looking in are not unconsolidated sands and the like that the oil guys are looking in. So our rocks are actually what we call faster. Our sound waves travel much faster through our rocks, so it creates a lot more technical challenges in resolving the signals, which is all seismic is a vibration, right. and the vibration goes into the ground and bounces back off certain layers and comes and we read it. And so working at the different scale and with those different rocks, really it's only been the last 5 years that we've had the computing power to deal with that amount of information and data and resolve it. And it's opened up exploration here in Ireland. I mentioned before Navan or Tara mines, which is the largest zinc mine in Europe, and one of the largest in the world. It's a plus 100 million ton system. It's been mining for 40 years. They're still mining today. They ran some seismics only over the last few years, and only over the last 2 years, and over the last year they made a new discovery. They found the key ore controls on that system. Despite having a world-class mine, 40 years mining, down here, a kilometre or two away from the mine and 500 metres deeper, they found the major part of the system, and they're drilling that now, and they've just put out a little bit of information, but that was unravelled through seismics. And that's exactly what we're doing here. We've got the ability to run seismics over this huge land package that we have here, over the known mineralisation, which helps us resolve and understand those structures that I talked about that are so important to understand in these systems, but to understand it at the much larger scale also. So it's a game changer for exploration here in Ireland and for the industry as a whole globally, but it's very applicable to exploration here, and we're looking quite deep here in Ireland, so it also shortcuts exploration, limits the amount of drilling that you have to do rather than blind drilling, and drilling's the most expensive part of our business. So it's a very efficient way of exploring it, as well as allowing us to understand the mineralised system. So yeah, we've just completed that survey, that data. There's so much data and so much specialisation and skills required to process that data that is coming out over the next few months. It literally takes a few months to look at all that data before we can start to use it really as we'd like to, and put drill holes onto those major anomalies, target structures that we find from that seismic data.
Excellent. Now in 2017 you were very successful in finding extensions to the known mineralization. I imagine 2018 you're going to do some exploration targeting?
Absolutely. So we have a 3-phase program here that's relatively simple to understand, and the first phase was big tick. And the first phase was to expand the known resource areas. So we drilled along the extensions, along strike, up dip and down dip from the known mineralisation, and every hole that we drilled hit, including some of the most spectacular results we received in the first few holes. Some of the highest grades I've seen in my career, and I've seen a lot of zinc, and I've never seen holes there. We up to 73% lead over 3 metres, and it was quite incredible. But
the regulators didn't believe the numbers, right? They had to call you multiple times to verify the numbers were correct.
The stock was halted on the basis that they didn't believe that this type of mineralisation could scientifically form that amount of lead in the rock, but it certainly does, and the result was validated over a few hours when we had a discussion with them. So we've not only intersected those very high grades, we've expanded the resource over hundreds of metres. So phase 1, resource expansion, tick. But that won't make the difference to this project ultimately alone. We need to find more of these pods that we talked about, more of these mineralised bodies. And that's where we're drilling now, and where some of the older seismics, there's been some seismics run by previous operator Lundin over the last few years, and we're using that data now to target some of our drilling within a kilometre or so of the known mineralisation, and that's looking for those additional pods. So phase 1, immediate extensions over hundreds of metres. Phase 2, within kilometres of the known zone, and then we've got 35,000 hectares, phase 3. And that's where our seismic looked at this. We've got what we call the Clare Basin here. We're in County Clare, and we've got the Clare Basin that have these host rocks that form the zinc mineralisation, and with the seismics that we've run now over this whole basin scale, we're literally peeling apart the geology and really understanding it for the first time. And it is groundbreaking in a geological and exploration sense. And we've got great hopes that it will help us define the next Kilbricken deposit here, and that could be within tens of kilometres of where we're looking. So they're the 3 different scales that we're looking at.
Now, we were on site yesterday and earlier today as well, and I was struck by the infrastructure. We're literally 15 minutes away from the airport, paved roads, power running through the property. Can you speak to that a bit?
Sure. I mean, there's different parts of the world you can explore, of course, and there's many zinc deposits in the world that are bigger and more tons than 10 million tons at 10%. But you must have that infrastructure to be able to develop any project. And here in Ireland, our threshold can be lower, so we can find something smaller that can be very economic and very profitable, as opposed to being in the middle of some more isolated part of the world. So they're the benefits of exploring here, without a doubt. You know, there's no shortage of skilled labour. No, we don't have to set up remote camps. We have power, of course, within anywhere of the site. There's roads, and the greatest challenge is to work with the communities and let them know what we're doing, and so they understand what we're doing here, exploring, and at the greatest degree we have a huge amount of support here in this community, and we're very thankful for that.
Social license is critical, and I think the recent seismic survey speaks to that. Can you talk about that process and how involved that was, and frankly the great job your team did with that?
Well, we do have a great team here in Ireland, and even though I'm talking to you about it here, there's much smarter people and better people behind me that are operating on this project, who've been working on the project for a long while too, and not only technically understand the project, but know how to work and live and breathe with the local people. So I think the seismic is a great example of just that social license to operate and to work and to integrate with the local people. We had 40 kilometres of roads that we surveyed, and every house along every part of that 40 kilometres, we knocked on the door, spoke to the people, dropped the brochure in, and everyone knew what to expect, because it literally looked like, as I've said to you before, that
aliens had landed, right?
Aliens had landed. There's antennas every 5 metres and these big trucks shaking the ground, and you don't want people to have surprises. You want people to understand what we're doing.
Sure. Can you talk about the market cap? You mentioned that 25 million had been sunk into the project. I think you've spent approximately 5 million now, so we're talking nearly $30 million. Where are you today market cap wise?
Well, we're not at that, so here's the opportunity, I suppose. We're at 12 million market cap today, and that's we've been pretty much range bounded over the last medium term around the 10 to 15 million dollar Canadian.
Well, you've said it's the right project in the right place at the right time. I think you've got the right management team. Mr. Hudson, thank you very much.
Thanks, Gerardo.
Appreciate it.